Now we have Marco Lambertini, convener of the Nature Positive Initiative, Imperial Highness Princess Takamado, and Astrid Schomaker, Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, to come on stage.
Very much, as the MC said, I'm here with two exceptional guests. They need no introductions, because we're introduced in the opening session, but also because they are two renowned thought leaders in the space of nature conservation. Of course, Her Imperial Highness, Princess Takamado, which I had the honor to have as my honorary president when I was working for BirdLife International. And she's one of the most active, internationally recognized Japanese voices on many things, but particularly, of course, regarding to the summit on nature conservation. Passionate, knowledgeable, keen on birds, photography, and many more things about nature. And also Astrid Schomaker, again, the executive secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, and I would add, just been appointed in her second term, because she's done such a wonderful job in her first term that she's been confirmed for the next years as well. So today, as you can see, this last session before lunch break is a slightly different format. It's not a panel discussion, it's more of a conversation with these two exceptional women. And it's my honor to ask you, maybe first question to break the ice, Your Highness. You have been in the space, particularly connected to BirdLife International, for more than a decade, and we have seen many good things happening. We've seen awareness growing, membership of organizations like BirdLife and many others increase, public awareness, protected areas being created, species recovering spectacularly in many regions of the world. But overall, unfortunately, which is all good news, right? Because this is progress. But overall, nature continued to decline. So, Your Highness, what do you think is needed to truly become a nature-positive society?
先ほど I spoke in English last time, so this session I will speak in Japanese. And you're absolutely right. 1992, Rio's Earth Summit. When looking back, maybe we should have acted with more urgency, and the world we live today may have been different. Having said that, this is a nature-positive summit, so I'll try to be positive as much as possible. And as an honorary chair of the BirdLife International, I'd like to say a few words regarding BirdLife. We have the BirdLife data zone for over a long time. Scientists globally have made research and uploaded the data, and it has been upgraded in a really user-friendly manner recently. 11,000 bird species are covered, and it is really user-friendly. BirdLife Data Zone in order to create a nature-positive society and economy, biodiversity, as well as the ecosystem that is the foundation for biodiversity, must be sustained. And from that perspective, data is essential. BirdLife Data Zone is indeed that kind of data. It is taking the BirdLife International's database, and from the perspective of the protection of bird species, the data is gathered, and there are so many findings that we can get from this data. And from large-scale NGO to NPOs globally to everyone in the world, this is available data, accessible data on the internet. You cannot take action without data. Companies cannot formulate strategies. So the data is already available. And so BirdLife data zone is created by BirdLife. And IUCN, Conservation International, and UNEP. World Conservation Monitoring Center. In partnership, IBAT, which is a tool to measure biodiversity. Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool, IBAT, is created. And this is made available to businesses. And it can be used in various ways based on the needs of the businesses. And it can be a way to formulate strategies. And we can provide advice as well. BirdLife International also provides advice to corporations. And this evaluation tool is now available in a really easy-to-use manner. And I believe that companies should tap into this. And one more comment that I like to make with response to the question on what we can do. In my earlier speech, I talked about Iceland, my visit to Iceland. And geothermal was a topic of discussion there. 30 years ago, when I went to Iceland, I was also asked why Japan doesn't utilize geothermal power. And I asked the mayor of Kumamoto City whether I can talk about geothermal in this summit. And I'm not talking about this just because we are in Kyushu. But geothermal energy, when you think about the environmental burden, it is a really excellent approach. Japan is an earthquake country, and the people of Iceland were very curious why Japan doesn't use geothermal power. And one reason is that people are concerned that it could be negative to the scenery by developing geothermal power. But one idea could be, why don't we have the wonderful architects of Japan build a beautiful geothermal plant? It could be a tourist site, perhaps. We should think of every idea. The climate is changing in unpredictable ways due to climate change. And geothermal power is very stable, and it could be very safe. And also, Japan has the technology to utilize geothermal power. Actually, Japanese companies are going to other countries, like in Africa, to build geothermal plants. Why don't we do the same in Japan? Rather than depending on fossil fuel, which we cannot continue to do, geothermal power plant could be very good for the Japanese society.
That's urgency, then data, the importance of data to drive decisions, but also the importance of partnerships. You mentioned the various organizations coming together about this data facility. And finally, innovation and technology. But more than innovation, technology that already actually exists. And so, excellent points to start the conversation. Astrid, you are heading in 3 months or so to Yerevan for a very important stock-taking moment in the GBF. We are going to be halfway towards 2030, and the COP17 of the Convention on Biological Diversity has created a lot of expectations in terms of where we are, what next, what are the key issues that we need to tackle. So can you give us a bit of a preview of what Yerevan will deal with, and also your expectations, perhaps?
Yeah, thank you, and with pleasure. So, indeed, we have a global biodiversity framework that is supposed to be achieved by 2030 with 23 targets, very ambitious targets in a space of 8 years, agreed in 2022. So we're right at the midpoint. And we have asked our parties to submit national reports so we understand what is the action taken in each individual country. And we've also looked at the many thousands of targets, actually, that countries have put in place nationally, often also locally, in order to meet the global targets. And then we have put out a draft report for peer review. And what this draft report is now showing us is, first of all, a very positive message, because as Her Imperial Highness was saying, we're at the Nature Positive Summit. There is a lot to celebrate. The Global Biodiversity Framework has generated unprecedented attention to biodiversity, but also engagement with biodiversity. And when I say engagement, I mean not just governments, I mean across society, including the business sector and also including the finance sector. So that is a very, very positive starting point. The second finding is, however, also, while progress is being made across the targets, that progress is uneven, and in particular, it is not fast enough. And very often, if I look at individual targets, only parts of the targets are actually taken forward. So let me take our maybe most famous target, the 30 by 30 target. So the world has committed to protecting 30% of global land and water and ocean by 2030. This already was one of the Aichi targets to move in this direction. Now we're taking it further. We see slowly, more land, more ocean are protected. We've just crossed the 10% ocean protection with the new BBNJ, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement. We have a lot of hope that we can advance there. But then very often there was a focus just on the numbers, not of the quality of the land or the sea that was protected, not on the inclusivity of how the land or the sea was designated and is being managed, not on the connectivity between protected areas. So the qualitative elements were lagging behind, but the quantitative, the numbers are moving forward, albeit also too slowly. And maybe I quote a second target to be quite concrete, and because we have so many business participants here, we have something we call the business target, that is target 15. That is about disclosure. Again, we see progress, and progress especially in Japan with a very high uptake of the TNFD, the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, and its recommendations. Japanese companies are showing the way. But the target is not just about disclosing, the target is about taking action. So disclosing, understanding your impacts and dependency on nature, but then also changing behavior towards more nature-positive behavior. And there, of course, as we've heard this morning and discussed already here, the question is how to measure that, so how to have the right metrics. Now, at COP17, this will all come together. So we will look at the global report. We will adopt a decision to say, how do we now go forward? How do we accelerate? But every COP, and especially these COPs that look at implementation, have two parts. They have the negotiations, and then they have the very, very important gathering of everybody. Because, and that's maybe a finish on that, what our report is also showing, the challenges are very, very big. But also solutions exist. And they exist for virtually every challenge and every target. And very often they're not necessarily high-tech and expensive solutions. It is often working with nature. It is often the global south, solutions that are born out of need, easily adaptable solutions that can be scaled up, but that need to be better known. So at the COP, based on this global stocktake, we will also have an important moment of discussing with each other what are these solutions, how can they be scaled, and very importantly, where does the money come from? And that is a crucial question that all conventions, all environmental conventions face, and ours is no exception.
Thank you, Astrid. Thank you so much for that preview of COP17. Interesting, the last point you made, where the money comes from. When we are, and we understand that there is a crisis, we find the money. The trillions that we put into emergency during the COVID shows that we can actually mobilize resources when we feel that it's really important for society and for the economy. So I'm confident that, as rightly said, biodiversity is higher and higher in the political, societal, and corporate agenda. Resources will begin to flow. We have another 10 minutes to spare, so let's get a bit more personal, shall we? In terms of understanding a little bit your personal perspective on the topic of nature positive. Princess, you again have been in this space for a long time now, and can you tell us a moment or an initiative or an experience that has really inspired you and make you feel, yes, it's possible to become nature positive?
Well, thank you. As the honorary chair of BirdLife International from 2003, I like to speak. From when I was very small, I have loved nature. I collected bird feathers and shells, and from an early age, I loved birds. But in the Imperial family, there are so many bird experts, and I couldn't really say that I was a bird lover. Princess Norinomiya was at the Yamashina Bird Institute, and there were so many people who were much more of an expert on this topic. But since I became honorary chair of BirdLife International, I felt like I had the right to talk about birds and to go bird watching in various places. And every time I didn't just do the bird watching tour, but I also spoke to local people. I learned so much. I attended many conferences. And so since 2003, over the rather long years, I have learned. I'm not an expert, but as an amateur, I have learned a lot on this topic. I'm speaking a lot about BirdLife International, but with regards to birds, I think it would be best to talk about birds for me. But putting that aside for 1 second, something that really moved me. When I went to Greenland and Canada, and I saw all the glaciers, I felt how small I am. And I felt different from, for example, when I was at a ski resort. Snow absorbs sound, but when you are in the midst of the ice sheet, the sound is reflected, and it was very different. But when you ask me about an achievement that we have done together, I like to share 2 achievements, one in Japan and one global. A Japanese grouse is different from global one. So Japanese raicho, ptarmigan, didn't go travel north, but it actually climbed mountains. So they are residing at the top of mountains, which means that they are impacted by global warming. So ptarmigan, a rock ptarmigan, through the climate warming and other environmental changes, the number has declined significantly. The number of ptarmigan residing in the Japanese Alps went down significantly. And Professor Yamashita said that when they are babies, they are at the most vulnerable because they could be caught by birds of prey, etc. And so if they survive the baby stage, they have a much higher likelihood of growing into adulthood. So rather than spending a lot of money, the nearby volunteers created a structure to put these baby ptarmigan in a cage only during nighttime. So there is no people who hunt the ptarmigan in Japan. So they are not afraid of human. So by covering the baby ptarmigan together with their mothers in a cage, they are not scared at all. And so once the chicks become a little larger, then the likelihood of surviving goes up. And there was one incident. One female ptarmigan flew to the Central Alps area, and then in the same manner, amongst the chicks that grew up in Norikura, some again traveled to Central Alps area. And so now we have more birds from other areas being protected with the cage when they are small. So again, this didn't require a lot of budget. It was made possible by Professor Nakamura and other volunteers and their passion. And this was a successful way to protect and recover the ptarmigan population. And also, the birds themselves chose to fly to Central Alps, where their ancestors were residing. Another is bald eagle. Maybe you don't have a good impression of vultures, but vultures actually play a very important role in the ecosystem because they eat carrion, and so they actually are like the cleaners of the earth. In India, from the late 1990s to 2000s, massive number of vultures were lost. The reason is very clear. The chemicals called diclofenac, which was used for cattle, it is used today as well, but this anti-inflammatory drug is life-taking for the vultures. And so after the vulture eats the carrion, which had the anti-inflammatory drug used on the cattle, the vultures die right away, and tens of thousands of vultures died as a result of that. Then carrion was not cleaned up from the earth. As a result of that, there were many wild dogs who ate the carrion, and rabies became rampant in India, which required a huge number of rabies to be taken care of. And there is the sky burial traditions, which became nearly impossible in that region. But now we are seeing some recovery in the vulture population, which allows partial sky burial to be possible. But when we think about the impact on society, I think this is a very important topic. Recently in Europe, number of vultures have gone down significantly, but this was actually the decline has been stopped. And also in Africa, there was a decline in the vulture population from a different reason, but we are working on stopping that as well. All the species play an important role. Biodiversity means that each species is playing an important role. Even a small bacteria could change the ecosystem, and vultures are big creatures. And for vultures to lay eggs, it takes 2 years, and for them to develop into an adult vulture, it takes a long time, and they can only lay 2 eggs at a time. It takes, when you think about the length of time it requires to nurture the population of vulture, we really have to think that it would be so much better if we had been able to prevent this from happening. So this was one lesson that I like to communicate with you, and this has been a great success overall. Thank you.
Wow, I have to say, we revealed a princess ornithologist to the world with a knowledge that is difficult to match about ptarmigan, vultures, and much more. Very, very impressive, Princess Takamado, and you can feel the passion beyond the knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing that. Astrid, I'm going to go back to business on the COP17 and ask you, particularly you referred to the target 15, we have little time now. So briefly, what do you expect from business? What is your ask for business in order to contribute to the GBF?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Let's maybe start by looking at what drives biodiversity loss. So we know it's climate change, we know it's land use change, invasive alien species, etc. And I think it is important when we look at these phenomena that we ask ourselves, well, why does this happen? And we take a step back and go to the actual systemic drivers. So ultimately, it is mankind that has been altering our planet. If our ecosystems are in a state of rapid decline, it is in the majority human intervention with those ecosystems that has caused this decline. So I think then the next question comes for the international community, but also for each of us, can we still turn this around? UNEP talks about the great nature turnaround. That's an exciting concept. And it is one that is not out of reach, but one that requires a lot more work. Now, if I look at businesses and I look at how money is being spent on this planet, there are a couple of really shocking figures out there. So UNEP has recently found that every year $7.3 trillion are spent on nature negative, on activities that harm nature. 4.9 trillion out of that come from business activities, aided and abated by 2.4 billion of government subsidies that support companies in taking essentially bad decisions. And I think those are figures that, that go to the heart of the problem and that should affect every one of us in our thinking about nature and in our thinking about human behavior. And what we expect at this COP to happen and what we expect from business more generally, and I come back to what I said before, is an understanding that business activities are not taking place in a vacuum. They have a real impact on our nature, on our biodiversity. And in the end, and I think that has also been conclusively shown by Marco in his presentation earlier, when we destroy nature, we destroy the basis of our own existence. And as Princess Takamado has been saying, the planet will survive happily without us. Whether humankind can survive, whether future generations still have a planet that is worth living, that's a different question. So business has to step up and has to say, well, can we do things differently? And then we have to understand this is not about business going out of business. It's about business being better stewards of nature. It is about business being supported by governments, by getting the right incentives, and we would like to have a good discussion at our COP about what these incentives are. How can we repurpose subsidies that induce companies to destroy nature to subsidies that induce companies to do things differently, become circular, use regenerative agricultural models, for example, move away from chemical fertilizers, etc., etc. So there are many solutions out there. We want to have this discussion about how business can engage more, but then also very importantly about how business can be supported in engaging more. That talks to governments, that talks to the financial sector. The financial sector has to ask probably more questions. What is it we are supporting when a company comes and asks for a loan? Let's do a really good check about which activities are being supported. And it goes to each of us as consumers. So are we actually, with our expectations from companies, driving companies to behave unsustainably? If we like our salads in a plastic box, is that a great way to sell a salad? Is it so much, or an orange, which is in its beautiful, perfect, natural packaging? Does it need another plastic wrapper around it? But yet, very often customers expect that, and then, of course, companies reply to that expectation because they have to stay in business. So we need to have this broader discussion about how we, as part of nature, not on top of nature, as you were saying in your opening remarks and as you were showing in your picture, as part of nature, how can we play a constructive role that allows us to survive, but also that allows the species on which we rely to survive. And I think that's what we want to happen at COP, and that's what we expect from business. Come here, don't feel that you're sort of on the stand or being accused, but do recognize you have a responsibility, and do also call governments to action and say, we cannot do it alone, governments can't do it alone, finance can't do it alone, but if we come together and we take the global objectives that we have set ourselves of living in harmony with nature seriously, then yes, we can still turn the ship, our planet, around. And biodiversity loss is not something we have to accept. But and you were saying, I think earlier, nature recovers. Nature is enormously resilient. Let's just give nature a chance.
Thank you so much. Beautiful, Astrid. And I don't think there is a better way than such a conversation to also show the persons behind the roles, the passion and the genuine commitment that His Imperial Highness and Astrid has shown. I'm very, very inspired. Your Highness, Astrid, thank you so much for the conversation. Apologies, we're a few minutes late. Thank you for staying with us. Enjoy the break and be on time, please, for the next session. Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimashita.